Console Cocktails number 3, sponsored by Backlighting. You may notice Joe's back!
Hi everybody, sorry I missed you for cocktail number 2.
And more importantly, the martinis are back.
I missed them more.
We're drinking a Dirty Pete, which is a drink suggested by Patrick Dearson.
Dirty Pete is basically a very dirty martini with 5 dashes of hot sauce. It's got quite a kick.
Yeah, it's pretty yummy. The same day we learned about this drink is when Joe did an interview with Justin Lang from iSquint.net talking about you're really doing that, aren't you?
Yeah, I squint, right? No?
Anyway, the interview is about grandMA2's, what's new in the hardware, what's new in the software, what's different from the Series 1.
We've got some video excerpts for you, but if you want to listen to the full podcast, you have to go to iSquint.net. Enjoy!
Enjoy!
So, Joe, let's start off with the hardware. What specifically is the difference between Series 1 and Series 2's hardware, besides the Battleship Gray going to black? I know that's a big thing that I like here. So,
well, the broad answer to that question is over the past 10 odd years that we've been selling and supporting the grandMA2 hardware and software, we've learned a lot of lessons from things that are not as good for a touring type of console, like say for instance a hard drive with a platter in it, for one thing, to things that could be a little more, let's say, user-proof, to be nice. So all of the lessons that we've learned over the years, we've tried to actually incorporate what we've learned into the new hardware. So starting very simply, for instance, we could look at the faders that we have. Just looking at them, touching them, they feel like the same type of fader caps that we had. But at this point, they're actually touch sensitive in the Series 2 mode. One of the things that leads to, or that gives you, in the Series 1 hardware, if you had, say, a whole bunch of subwoofers front of house, you could have an excessive amount of vibration, and that vibration could push one of your faders up off of 0, which could trigger one of your cues if you had it set to do so. So you could have cues firing in the middle of the show that you didn't actually mean to have firing. So at this point, the fader being touch sensitive, it actually realizes the difference between vibration in the room and your finger actually moving the fader.
So you're saying if there's a lot of bass and the faders are accidentally moved from vibration, there's nothing triggered from that slide.
Exactly, because it realizes it's not you moving the fader.
Wow, impressive.
Or I mentioned before a platter-driven hard drive being something that's again dealing with vibration as you might have with subwoofers front of house or located somewhere very near the console in your installation. All of the hard drives within the console in the Series 2 line are all solid state, so no moving parts, completely not susceptible to any sort of vibration or shock damage or anything like that. One of the things you might notice immediately looking at the console is the buttons. Instead of having a silk screening on the console, we actually have a laser etched LED backlit button. Every button on the console is made this way. So for the most part, I personally don't even tend to use the desk lights on the console anymore because I don't need to light up the keys because they light up all by themselves.
Exactly.
Great.
Now, one thing I did notice when I saw the board earlier was there's no enter key.
That is true. The syntax, though, remains very much the same. Everything that you were used to doing on the Series 1 within the syntax, you can still do, with the addition of a whole lot more that you're able to do. But you're right, the enter key is gone. There is a key still in its place, and that key now says please.
Okay, why please?
Because we wanted this to be a very polite console. On the Series 1 full size, you'd be used to 20 of what we call executor faders, so playbacks you can think of them. And then a bank of 40 executor buttons where you could augment all of that with whatever you like as long as it doesn't specifically require a fader. On the Series 2 full size, you're looking at now 30 faders instead of 20 and 50 executor buttons instead of 40. So some of them have shuffled around a little bit. Where you used to have the 40 executor buttons, you now only have 20, but the other 30 actually line up under all of the executor fader buttons. So it kind of allows you to be a little bit more ambidextrous in your playback. Okay. In the place of where we had those extra executor buttons in Series 1, you'll actually find a screen showing up there. In fact, this is a multi-touch screen on the console. So this allows us to do some very interesting things. At this point, we've got some views built in there for controlling colors and also for playing around with framing shutters within fixtures. But we have a very long list of a lot of things that we're going to be able to do with multi-touch screen.
Fantastic.
As I mentioned, kind of take everything that you know about a grandMA2 and multiply it. Sometimes by 4, sometimes by 10.
Specifics, what are we talking about?
Well, for instance, if you were to look at something like a groups pool or any of your preset pools, in the Series 1 you're used to being able to store about 1,000 of each of those. Now you're looking at being able to store about 10,000 of each of those.
I need more.
Okay.
Can I have more?
Yes, actually you can. One of the things that the grandMA2 series of consoles does very well in terms of software is its multi-user support, whereby we may have multiple consoles controlling different aspects of the same show file.
Mm-hmm.
So for instance, maybe one person is controlling video, another person is controlling moving lights, somebody else might have conventionals and LEDs. So maybe me as the moving light programmer, I don't want to have to think about all of the rest of those things. So there are ways in Series 1 to be able to very easily kind of section off the patch of the console with something that we call worlds, so that I only have to deal with and see in my screens all of the things that I'm actually concerned with. And that extends to the point where if I were to delete a queue that had information from everybody's patch, I would only be allowed to delete what was in my world.
Oh, okay.
In the Series 1, if you looked at your executors, everyone had the same executors. So if I put something on page 1, you would see it. If I moved the fader, you would see it. Group 1 was Group 1 was Group 1, no matter where you went.
Across the whole show.
Across the whole show. So the only thing that was really something that you could break up was essentially the programmer of the console. Everyone else still shared all the rest of the data. In Series 2, we're introducing kind of the next step of that multi-user programming, allowing that to extend to multi-user programming and playback as well. So now, at this point, I'm logged in as a particular user, and I can store 10,000 groups. If I were to log in as a different user, I would have the ability of creating 10,000 of my own groups.
And how many users are we limited to?
At this point, I think you're allowed to have something like 200 on the network.
Wow. Okay.
So the nice part about that is that this is all built into the command line syntax of the console. So whereas before I would select group 1, if I were to select group 2.1, then that would be group 1 out of somebody else's groups pool. So we still have the ability for us to work in concert with each other. Maybe if you've created a bunch of color presets that I'd like to use, I wouldn't have to switch to your user. I can just pick and choose things that I want to grab.
Impressive. Impressive. I like that. So, I can't even think right now. You're blowing my mind away.
That's my job.